This is Death, Lies, and Alibis. Hello, I'm your host, Christy. Out here in rural Ohio, the nights are quiet, but not always peaceful. Every silence has a name, and every shadow has a story. And every cold case carries a weight you can feel if you stand still long enough. Today, we step into another one of those stories, forgotten by some and never forgotten by others. So let's go together to where the questions are still hiding. Content warning. This episode contains discussion of homicide, domestic violence, suicide, opioid use, and sex trafficking. Listener discretion is advised. Before we dive in, here is where we left Sydney in episode 1. We learned who she was behind all the names, the trauma she carried, the dangerous world she got pulled into, and the rumors that made her a target. We followed her through Florida, Columbus, and Licking County, through addiction, exploitation, fear, and a life surrounded by people who used her or wanted something from her. And we ended with this: Sydney alive, scared, and surrounded by the wrong people. James, Sydney's husband, at the time was incarcerated during her final weeks of her life. Now, in episode 2, we pick up where everything started to unravel: the final weeks, the fires, the locations, and the names that keep surfacing. The last weeks of Sydney's life were chaos. She was bouncing between houses, hotels, and garages. People say she was scared. People say she knew too much. And people say she was being set up. Her name showed up in more than one criminal case file in Licking County. Huge. That's not normal. That's the kind of thing that makes you a target, especially if you were really working with CODE, the Central Ohio Drug Enforcement Task Force, and especially if the men in charge of your case were the same men who allegedly you thought were corrupt. So in this episode, we want to dig into the trail of the fires and the fear. Dewey Avenue, Drago Drive, Sherwood Avenue, the garages, the houses, and the names that keep surfacing, and the people who may have known what happened to Sydney. Because if the rumors are true, she wasn't just killed, she was silenced. And to understand what happened to Sydney, we first have to understand the world she was trapped in. And that takes us straight into the web around her. When James went to jail, everything shifted overnight. Sydney wasn't just using, she wasn't just bouncing from place to place. She was suddenly carrying a weight of everything: her addiction, her marriage, her survival, and the impossible task of trying to pull together bond money she didn't have. That kind of pressure doesn't just crush your shoulders, it crushes your whole world from the inside out. She had no stable home, no income at all, no safe family in Ohio to fall back on. I mean, no one could step in and say, hey, come stay here, hang out, we'll figure this out. But because she was actively in her addiction, so she ended up in the worst possible positions: addicted, isolated, and surrounded by people who controlled her access to everything: rides, drugs, money, shelter, even information. People love to judge women and addiction. They love to talk about it. But what they never talk about is the reality. Because when you're homeless, scared, and desperate, the people who offer you a couch become the people who own you. And that's exactly the world Sydney was felt herself trapped in. She stayed at hotels because she had nowhere else to go. She asked to sleep on couches because there were no safe places left. She kept bouncing between unsafe places, not because she wanted to, but because those were the only doors that opened for her. And when you're a young woman, alone in a world full of dangerous men with power, your fear becomes their advantage. Sydney was stressed, exhausted, and she felt completely alone. She was trying to help James get out, but no one was helping her. And that emotional collapse, that isolation, is exactly how predators move in. It's how control starts. It's how traffickers operate. It's how the violence escalates. She wasn't choosing danger, folks. She was trying to survive in a world where every so-called friend wanted something. And every man she trusted saw her something to use, not as a person. And that's why her movements matter, okay? That's why the properties matter. That's why the timeline matters. Because a woman this isolated is a woman predators believe no one will fight for. But they were wrong, weren't they? And when someone becomes this vulnerable, the next question is obvious. Who had access to her those last days? Well, new sources come forward. We'll call her Tammy. She was sitting in the same jail pod as Sydney when her and James got busted the last time. And what she shared doesn't just add questions, it flips this whole damn story. She says that Sydney wasn't just stressed, she was cornered. She couldn't even get her own dealer to accept her calls. She had to borrow Tammy's account just to reach out to somebody. And she heard Sydney crying and swearing she hadn't given anybody up, terrified that someone out there thought she had. And right in the middle of all this panic and pleading, Tammy says she saw for herself Detective Todd Green pull Sydney aside in the jail several times and take her downstairs to talk. Yes, this is the same Detective Green whose name keeps threading its way through this case like a loose electric wire. Now put all that together, and you don't see a woman making bad choices, only making bad choices. You see a woman being squeezed from every direction. December 3rd, 2018. A cold Monday night in rural Ohio. It's the kind where the darkness comes early and settles in heavy. The air was sharp, the road was quiet, and nothing about Licking Trails Road stood out. It was just another rural shortcut most people use to avoid tragedy until that night.
Okay. 911, what is the address? The emergency. There's a dead body and a dead on Licking Trails Road off of Irving Lake. If you're coming down Irving Lake off of 79 towards 13, when you pass Orange Carryout on your left, if you turn right on the road that's right there, Licking Trails, it's like maybe not even a quarter mile up, in between like 2-3 cars. It's in a plastic bag, but it looks just like a body. I'm scared and I'm thinking I don't know what to do. Okay, how do you know that it's a dead body, sir? It looks like it's a black trash bag, and it's like it's tied up, but like you can see the head and the feet, and it's so like it looks like a body, ma'am. I'm at Ontario. What's your name? My name is Joe. Okay, can you? I'm at. You're at Ontario, right? Yes, ma'am. Okay, you're over by Green Valley Drive. Yes, ma'am. Okay. I'm liking Green Valley Drive. All right. Hold on just a minute. Let me get you over to the sheriff's office, okay? Hold on just a minute. Can you send someone here, like, right now? There's a dead body in the ditch, ma'am. John, listen to me. I'm going to have you talk to them, okay? Because they've already had a deputy in the area. So I need to just let you talk to them instead of transferring these messages over. So just stay on the line and let me have you talk to them, okay? Hold on just a minute. One moment. You said it's in a trash bag, like a black trash bag? Yes, ma'am. Is someone on the way here? Could you please send a cop here? I can show it to him or them. Yes. We're gonna have an officer come out there, okay? I'm trying to get all this information in here because I'm taking a call while my partner dispatches this. She's going off of my note. But this is really uncomfortable. I was just looking at it. And I'm right down the road here. Okay, so does it look, I just need to have a description of what it appeared to look like to you. I just it's very close. Well, you just see the outline of like the bag is tied and not like on the same side as the feet. And it looks like you see like the feet, one is in the shoulders and it looks it's a full bag. Like it's away. Alright. Please, ma'am, I'm not playing around here. I know, sir, I know. We have officers coming, okay? I just needed information for it, okay? I'm gonna ask whether the light footprints are like that. I'm right here in Ontario. I'll take a light search. It's right there. Officer coming, okay? Do you want me to stay on the phone with you until they get there? Oh, I'm sorry, did you? I gotta see how far they're coming from. Hold on. Okay, I don't think that they're very far out, okay? So I would say probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes. Alright. If I need, I'll call back.
Okay, you can always call back. Do you want me to give you the non-emergency number so that you can get direct?
No, I'll just look it up.
Okay.
Okay, Lori, is this how we visit it, right?
This is going to be the Licking County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. If anything changes, give me a call back. But stay right there at the carryout. That way the officer can meet with you, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Just after 10 p.m., a small group of people noticed something in a ditch. It was a large black trash bag. It was duct tape, but it was torn just enough to show some bare, pale skin, a shape no one wanted to recognize. They got closer. They looked, and the truth hit them. It was a woman, curled in a fetal position, left like garbage. It was Sydney. Not gently placed there, not covered with care, but thrown. The ditch was cold. The ground was hard. And Sydney, a young woman who had been fighting for her life, spent her final moments alone with only strangers standing over in shock. No husband, no family, no one who loved her, just darkness. The world around her kept moving. Cars drove by, houses slept. Just a quiet night holding a devastating truth. And there was no breaking news alert, no urgent press conference. What Sydney got instead was silence, a case that slipped in the background almost immediately. But here's the part that stays with you. She was surrounded by danger in life, but she was surrounded by strangers in death. Those strangers, they didn't know her story. They didn't know her past. And they didn't know the world she'd been stuck in. But when they found her, they didn't look away. They did what the people around her hadn't been able to do. They saw her. And that moment, that discovery in the ditch, it's where her story changes hands. See, someone wanted Sydney gone. Someone believed tossing her like trash would erase her from the world. But it didn't. Those witnesses carried her story out of that ditch. Finding Sydney should have been the moment everything kicked into high gear. The moment investigators dug deeper, asked harder questions, and treated her death like the crime scene it looked like. But that's not what happened. Instead of answers, what came next was silence. An autopsy report that raised just as many questions that it did answers. So let's talk about what happened next. What the coroner found and what they didn't find. And why so much of Sydney's truth was left on the cutting room floor. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of fear-driven rumors about really what happened to Sydney's body. People claim she was cut up, mutilated, or chopped, repeating rumors that never came from evidence. Because her autopsy tells a completely different story. I have it and I've seen it. Sydney was examined on December 4th, 2018, the day after she was found. And the truth is simple. She was fully intact, not dismembered, not cut up, and not mutilated. What people mistook as injuries were normal post-mortem changes. It's the kind that happen when a body has been exposed to the elements. Here's what the autopsy actually shows, okay? It was skin sloughing, and that's from moisture and decomp. Small red brown marks on the face, feet, hands, and body. Again, that's normal after death. She was fully clothed, and she was in muddy trash bags. No sharp force injuries. The coroner ruled her cause of death as acute multiple drug effects, with the manner of death as undetermined, meaning the drugs were strong enough to kill her, but they couldn't say whether it was accidental, self-inflicted, or intentional. Now, on the street, we call a dose like that, as high as I saw her levels in toxicology, we call that a hot shot. It's not a medical term, but it's a weapon. It's when someone is given a dose meant to kill, not to get them high. And here's why that raises eyebrows. Sydney did not have a history of overdose, and this is so important. For all the chaos in her life, she was careful with her dosing. That does happen. That happens all the time. There's people like that. She knew her limits. So why would she suddenly, all of a sudden take a fatal, completely out of character amount. That doesn't line up with her behavior. And another thing people never consider, we don't know if the medical examiner had experience recognizing a deliberate homicide. We don't know his experience. The drug world evolves faster and faster than textbooks. Some coroners are up to date and some aren't. So an undetermined ruling doesn't rule out a hotshot. It just means science alone couldn't tell the story. Here's what is clear, though. Sydney was not cut up. Okay, for you people that love her and you worry about her, I have been asked this question so many times. Please put your mind at ease. She was not. Her body showed environmental changes, but no violence. Her friends and community, they deserve the truth, not rumors, not horror stories, not gossip. Now, she was a woman trying to survive, a mother wanting her kids back, and a wife of only 4 months. She was someone who helped others even when she couldn't help herself. This isn't about defending her choices. I don't. It's about defending her dignity. The facts paint a different picture than the one people have been whispering for years. And the science is only part of it, because nothing prepared me for standing where she was left in that ditch. After Sydney died, something else started happening. Places began to disappear. Not quietly. They burned. Drago Drive, a garage tied to Mark Miller, gone. Sherwood Drive, a property connected to Tom Campbell. Tom has responded to my texts, denied any involvement with Sydney. He told me he really didn't know Sydney very well. He said he and James had known each other for a long time, and that he had only met her a couple of times, always with James. But then he contradicted himself a couple times and said that he was with her alone and changing his story about when he last saw her. Now, to be fair, this has been 8 years, but something this important, it should be stamped in your mind. Now, according to Tom, the last time he saw Sydney was at the Cherry Valley Lodge. In one text, he said that, but then claims it was at another place in another text. He said James asked him to help to take Sydney to pick up some money for him, and Tom agreed. That, he says, was the last time he ever saw her. As for the garage fire, Tom says the rumors don't make sense to him. He told me that the fire happened before Thanksgiving. He said he was working on his motorcycle with a heater on the floor, that he spilled about a half a cup of gasoline, and according to Tom, the fire spread instantly. He said he was engulfed in flames while holding the gas tank and a gas can, that he barely made it out alive. He described blistering on the side of his face, and his coat melted into his clothes. He told me he scared him badly. Well, that's his explanation. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying he's lying. But in a case like this, where timelines and locations and memories matter so much, every account becomes part of the larger picture, especially when multiple stories exist side by side. And in this case is full of them. There's one detail that didn't sit right with this. Tom said he had burned his face in the fire, but I have spoke to people that knew him around that time, and no one mentions burns or scars, no stories about any injury. That doesn't prove anything. But when a detail can't be confirmed by anyone else, it does matter. Because in cases like this, the smallest inconsistencies often carry the most weight. And detectives kept asking witnesses the same question. Do you know about the fire on Sherwood? Now, this isn't just pure curiosity, that's a lead. Did someone believe that Sydney's body had been in one of those places and they panicked? And then there's the Holiday Inn, a known hotspot for drugs, trafficking, and it's the same tight circle of names that keeps resurfacing here. Locals say Sydney was there near the inn. Now, it burned in 2022. It burned to the ground. Total loss. And then there's Cherry Valley Lodge. No fire there, but boy, this is where multiple people say Sydney was last seen on her last days. With a man named Corey Henderson. We'll get back to him in a minute. Because when buildings keep burning and the same names keep surfacing, it stops feeling random and it starts looking like a pattern. And patterns tell stories people don't want told. Now, according to multiple locals, And I want to be absolutely clear. These are allegations and they're community claims. They're not verified facts yet. A group of men are routinely mentioned in connection to Sydney's final days. Their names come up again and again. And that's Jason Thompson, Everett Gillen, Dale Matson, Corey Henderson, and Jesse Messina. Now, there's more, but these five get repeated the most. And people in town, they don't whisper these names, they say them outright. Now, Jason Thompson's name shows up in a quiet corner of this case when people talk about Sydney's final days. A reliable source told me that DNA attributed to Jason was reportedly found inside Sydney. I haven't seen the official lab paperwork, and I want to be clear about that, but Jason himself told me that yes, he and Sydney were together those last weeks. Jason says it was consensual that he and Sydney were sleeping together. But more than one person told me that Sydney denied that when she was alive. Now, I'm not accusing Jason of hurting her. I'm not claiming he committed a crime. What I'm saying is this: Jason wasn't some stranger on the fringe. The same names tied to the houses and the hotels and the locations in her final days. Well, Jason was reportedly around that same circle. Now, that doesn't make him guilty, but it does make him relevant. Jason is currently incarcerated on unrelated charges, but he reached out to me and he shared what he says he saw during those last weeks. According to Jason, he saw Sydney, or him and Sydney were bouncing between hotels and houses, trying to stay ahead of both the cops and James. He told me that Sydney was overwhelmed, scared, and trying to get out from under the life she was stuck in. Jason said he cared about her, that he actually loved Sydney. He says James treated her badly. And he says Sydney told him that she wasn't going to take the fall for James anymore. Again, his words, not conclusions. Jason also alleged that at one point, police picked Sydney up and that Detective Todd Green spoke with her privately. According to Jason, this was part of why people believed Sydney was cooperating with law enforcement. A rumor that can be dangerous, whether it's true or not. What Jason gives us is context, not answers. It's a picture of Sydney running, afraid, overwhelmed, and surrounded by the people who wanted something from her. We're showing you one more piece of the world she was living in, a world where fear spreads fast and rumors can get you killed. Now, next is a name that carries real weight in this story, and that's Everett Gillen. If you're from around Buckeye Lake, you already know this name. Big drug case, serious weight, serious fallout. And according to my source, Sydney's name showed up in his discovery docket. Right there in black and white. That's paperwork. That's real life. And here's the part that puts ice in your blood. Allegedly, he found out. Now put yourself in Sydney's shoes for 1 second. You're bouncing between houses, scared, broke, isolated, and suddenly a man with a major drug case hanging over his head, he knows that you're tied to it. People said she set him up. Even if she only touched the edges of that investigation, it could have painted a target on her back so bright you could see it from space. And here's what my sources tell me. Maybe he was looking for answers or someone to blame. Now, that doesn't make him guilty of anything involving Sydney's death. It just makes him relevant, very relevant. Because when you start lining up the names tied to her last weeks, the danger wasn't just from the men using her. It was also from the men who thought she'd crossed them. Everett Gillen wasn't some fringe character, see. He was a major player in a case people still talk about. And supposedly, Sydney's name was tied to it on paper, whether she wanted it to be or not. And in her world, paper is just as deadly as a bullet. Now, this is where the story goes from bad to unbelievable. Dale Matson allegedly told people he knew who killed Sydney. Locals say that he claimed to have evidence. He said he could prove corruption, and he said that Sydney's death wasn't random. He said certain men were involved, and he was ready to talk. Dale was James's bodyguard / best friend. And then he was murdered. Now, unofficially, it's said to be over a woman, but the streets tell a different version. They say Dale was silenced. They say he knew too much, that he talked too loudly. They say his death wasn't about a woman at all. When someone claiming to know the truth ends up dead, people pay attention. But I spoke to one of the killers who denied that Dale's murder was over Sydney. The message I'm talking about came from Jason Castle. Jason Castle is not a bystander in this story. He is a man who was convicted in the murder of Dale Matson, and that matters. His words don't come from a neutral place. They come from inside the very world we're talking about. Castle told me he wished he could help more. He said that on the street, at least some of the names we've discussed are believed to be involved in what happened to Sydney. He also said something that comes up again and again in cases like this, that the streets often know more than official investigators ever reveal. Castle described himself as an outsider to Newark, someone who made choices that pulled him into a dangerous circle he didn't fully understand until it was too late. He warned me directly to be careful. He described several of the men involved in this case are dangerous. He expressed concern, especially about Mark Matheny, claiming Matheny has close ties to law enforcement. Now, those are allegations, not proven facts. Jason also addressed Dale Matson's murder directly. He insists that Dale's death had nothing to do with Sydney, drugs, or recordings. He claimed it was about abuse, about stopping harm to women and children. That is his account. And Jason was clear about one thing above all else. He believes multiple people were involved in what happened to Sydney. And he believes the number of people involved and who they were connected to may be exactly why the investigation went nowhere. Jason asked that if his name comes up, the record should clear this, okay? That according to him, Dale's murder was not connected to Sydney's death. Those are his words. They don't prove anything, but they do tell us something important. Sydney's story lives inside a world where the violence, fear, and loyalty, and silence overlap, where the truth doesn't vanish. Here's what becomes hard to ignore once you line up these names. These weren't random men floating around Sydney. They were all connected. They were connected directly to James, her husband of only 3 months. People have even rumored that once he said he married her so she couldn't testify against him. He denies it, but more than a few people said he's admitted to them. Jesse Messina, a close friend and business associate, Everett Gilliard, person of interest because Sydney may have snitched on him, Dale Matson, a loyal, protective, almost bodyguard figure, and Jason Thompson, not a friend, but still orbiting the same group and having sex with his wife. Now let's talk about another name that keeps sliding across this case like oil slick. On the streets, they call him a plug. We talked about her plug, her dealer, she was trying to reach out to when she was in jail. Was it Corey? People say he's the guy you called when you needed your product, drugs. He's the guy who knows who's buying, who's using, who's slipping, and who's desperate. And in the final stretch of Sydney's life, Corey's name does come up more than once. And it's not whispered and not hinted at, but it's just said out loud. People told me he was one of the last men seen with Sydney, that she was around him in those last days. The days when she was running scared, bouncing from spot to spot, trying to keep herself alive. She was seen leaving the Cherry Valley Lodge with him, like he said, a week before she was found. You know how to track a story like hers? You follow the access points. The drugs, the cars, the houses, and the men who had control over those things. Corey Henderson fits that puzzle. He wasn't a boyfriend and he wasn't a friend. He wasn't some random passerby who just happened to be around. He was the alleged plug, a known dealer in Licking County. Someone who knew the flow, who owed who confronted who was using too much, and who knew too much. And in this world, your plug isn't just the person who sells to you. They're the person who knows your weakness, your habits, your routine, your desperation, everything. So if Sydney was with Corey towards the end, that matters because a dealer doesn't just happened to be around a woman in free fall. He's there because she needed something he controlled, or because she had something he wanted. Some people say Corey was one of the last people she saw alive. Some say she was at Cherry Valley Lodge with him and others. They say Corey was a part of that same tight little circle where too many names overlap, too many houses burned, too many stories that don't match. Now, Corey did talk to me. He told me the situation was sad and that his heart goes out to Sydney's family. He said he spoke with the detective several times and told them everything he knew. Corey acknowledged that his name has been mentioned, along with others, and he said he was aware of the stories circulating about him. He described those stories as being bizarre. He told me he doesn't have a theory about what happened to Sydney either, only what detectives shared with him. Corey said he met Sydney, Blue, through James, that they were all friends, but he emphasized that he didn't know her very well and that he didn't know much about her life or what she was involved in. Again, I'm not accusing him of harming Sydney. I'm not saying he put her in that trash bag. I am saying this. When a woman ends up in a ditch in trash bag, you look at the last people who had access to her. You look at the people whose names surface repeatedly. And you look at the people who were part of her world when she was afraid, alone, and begging for help. Corey Henderson seems to be one of those names. And in a case like this, names that appear over and over, they're not random, they're clues. So what does that mean? These men who are tied to Sydney's final days are also tied to James. That leaves us with a few possibilities. One is that one of them turned on their friend. Two is that one of them is capable of real harm. And three, James himself is more connected to this story than anyone wants to admit. Now, the numbers don't lie. When every major name leads back to the same inner circle, you're not looking at a coincidence. You're looking at a cluster of people who all sat close to Sydney's life and close to her death. Someone in James' world knows exactly what happened. So the real question is this: was this a betrayal among friends or a secret being protected? And within that list, one name stands out because of the history behind it, and a history that stretches back decades. Jesse Messina's name comes up over and over when people talk about Sydney's final days. Now, Jesse doesn't just have a criminal record. He has a timeline of missed chances, a timeline of warnings, a timeline of a man slipping through the cracks that should have stopped him decades ago. Back in 1992, he was just 18 when he was charged with receiving stolen property. According to court records, the case was never fully heard. It just faded. And that became the pattern. Throughout the 90s and the 2000s, you see the same thing. Charges filed, judges writing must appear, warrants issued, violations, and nothing ever sticking. Now, meanwhile, the list grows. You get multiple drug charges, forgery, using a vehicle without permission, domestic violence, violation of court orders, repeat offenses that never lead anywhere. Every one of those should have been a red flag, a warning sign, a moment to say, hold up, this man is escalating. But the system didn't stop him, not once, not across 3 decades. Now let's fast forward to 2024. Where do we find him? Well, we are booked on strangulation charges. Yes, from stolen property at 18 to putting his hands around someone's throat at 50 years old. That's not coincidence. That's an intense criminal history. And here's why you're hearing this name right now. That makes him our person of interest. Not proven and not confirmed, but repeated often enough that we can't ignore it. And now I want you to hear this for yourself, because it's one thing for me to talk about Jesse's history, but it's another thing when he gets on the phone and speaks for himself.
I didn't kill her. I didn't move the body. I didn't have nothing to do with nothing that happened to her. How about that?
That's Jesse denying everything. firm and sharp, defensive. But when you place that denial next to 30 years of charges and failures and violent behavior, the question isn't, was Jesse Messina capable of hurting Sydney? The question is, why was he never stopped before it got this far? Now, here's a detail that locals bring up again and again. That is that Kyle Boyster and Jesse Messina are related through marriage. They're brother-in-laws. Jesse's sister is married to Boyster. Could this explain the question that keeps surfacing? How did Jesse make it through decades of arrests, charges, and violations with almost no real consequence? Because as we see, Jesse has been in trouble repeatedly. Very public court records show a long drug case history, forgery, domestic violence, probation violation, bench warrants. Most recently, I said strangulation. But almost nothing ever sticks. Cases dissolve, warrants disappear, violations go nowhere. And that's why the locals whisper. Is it because of the family connection? I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying there was favoritism. But what I am saying is this. In any small county, any rumored family ties between a narcotics officer and a repeat offender who never seems to face full accountability, that's the kind of detail you can't ignore. I mean, the pattern raises questions and the community sees the pattern. And at the end of the day, this right here is what matters most to me. People believe Sydney was talking. They believed she was tied to big cases, big dealers, big operations. Whether she ever signed paperwork or wore a wire almost doesn't even matter now. Because in her world, once folks think you're feeding information to law enforcement, you're marked. That belief, that reputation of being one who set people up, is the shadow hanging over the name in this case. So let's talk about the people who say they know more than anyone else and the pieces of her story they've been sitting on. There's a name that keeps surfacing in Sydney's story. It's not quietly either, not accidental, but persistently. Mark Matheny, private investigator slash bail bondsman slash Superman, if you ask him. A man who operates in the space between the streets and the system. Mark is confident, almost aggressively so. The first thing he told me was this: I know more about this case than her husband, her mother, or the cops. He stated it just like that. Mark says he had $5,000 contract to find Sydney, dead or alive, a contract to bring her in from another bonding company. He says he was always so close, just one day, maybe two behind her. Close enough to see the pattern, but never close enough to reach her. He told me that if he had found her sooner, she might still be alive. That's how he frames his role in the story. The man who tried, the man who was too late. Now, Mark says he never met Sydney, never spoke to her, never saw her, dead or alive. But he says he knows the story better than anyone. He also knows the rumors, because his name, along with Detective Todd Green, has been whispered in connection with her death, and not in a good way. Mark doesn't dodge that either. He denies it outright. He says he was in Florida. He says the accusations come from crackheads and then they're not credible, that they're angry and that they're wrong. Because here's the problem. Those are the same kind of stories that terrified Sydney. On the street, Mark is described very differently than he described himself. People place him deep inside the same world Sydney was trying to escape, the same circles and the same men, the same shadows where drugs, money, favors, and sometimes women move quietly. Some people allege he trafficked women, not just drugs. Others say they've been to his place and they've seen things firsthand. That he was comfortable in a world built on control and silence. Now again, these are street claims, not proof. I've spoken with Mark more than once, and I'll tell you this honestly, I can't get a steady vibe on that man. His energy shifts. His confidence swells as large as I've ever heard. He answers questions, but only the way he wants to answer them. This doesn't make him guilty. But it does make him unsettling to some people. I can see that, especially when his name does appear in places you question, like in the tote. Sydney's belongings, her papers, there were notes and phone numbers, pieces of her life that never got a chance to settle in. Well, inside that tote was a business card of Mark Matheny's, and it was new, crisp, not worn. Now, I asked Mark about that, and he said he was leaving his card everywhere looking for her. And maybe that's true. And then he said this, that he hadn't even paid attention to how long Sydney had gone silent. That someone closer to her probably lost contact with her closer to the date that her body was found. And that detail matters because it quietly challenges the idea that she had been missing for weeks. Now, Mark insists he knows things others don't, that even Sydney's mother didn't know everything. He says the accusations against him forced him to dig deeper into this case, that being blamed made him look closer. And he says this plainly, without hesitation. If anyone wants to hear my entire story, I'll tell it. I don't care if it's published. So this is where Mark Matheny sits in Sydney's story. A man who says he was always just right behind her. A man who said name frightened people she trusted. A man whose card ended up in her things. And a man who says he knows everything but arrived too late to save her. And the question isn't whether Mark wants to be heard. He certainly does. The question is whether he's telling the story or trying to stay ahead of it. When people in Licking County talk about Sydney, if they talk about her at all, it's in whispers, a quick mention or a shrug. Don't ask me about it. But for me, she's not a whisper. She's not a rumor, and she's not another forgotten case tossed in a corner. She's a life that was stolen, a story cut short, a young woman who deserves so much better from every single person and system around her. And there's one place that brings the truth crashing in harder than anywhere else. And that's her spot, the roadside cross. Just off Licking Trails Road, where her body was dumped, there's a small patch of grass. If you're not looking, you'll drive right past it. But there it is, a beautiful wooden cross. Sometimes flowers, sometimes candles, sometimes a photo tucked gently against the wood. It's a quiet shrine, a reminder that someone was left here, and someone cared enough to mark the spot. Well, I went there, and I stood in the grass where she was found. I placed flowers, and I talked to her. I told her why I was there, that I wasn't there to forget her, or to repeat rumors, or to let her story be twisted by people that failed her. I told her I was there to tell the truth, her truth, and I swear I felt something, not in my head, but in my gut. It was like a quiet yes, like she was saying, tell them I'm with you. So I made her a promise right there at her cross. I won't stop. I'll keep digging. I'll keep talking. And I'll keep standing in the place where other people look away. And this isn't just going to be a podcast, folks. This is going to be bigger. We're making a full documentary on Sydney's story. We'll name names. We'll map out the connections. We'll show the receipts. We'll follow every lead, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. I'll take time. I'll take the guts because she's worth it. Because if we don't tell her story truthfully, the people who failed her, they win. And I'm not letting that happen. And that moment at her cross is why this story cannot end here. Because someone out there knows the truth. Standing at Sydney's cross, I made her a promise. I will not let them bury you twice. Not in the ground and not in silence. From day one, the system made it easy to look away, easy to ignore and to forget. The early reports didn't tell her story. They didn't talk about her dreams or her trauma, her fight to survive, or the people who loved her. They reduced her to a headline, a label, just a stereotype. They treated her like she was disposable, as those black plastic bags she was found in. But she wasn't. She was a wife, a mother, a daughter, and a friend. A human being trying to claw her way out of the life that eventually killed her. And she should still be here. The truth is not going to come from the people who wrote her off. It's not going to come from the ones who said she was just another addict. It's going to come from you, the people who know things, who saw things, who've been scared to speak. It's you, the listeners, who can start putting the pieces together, but not quite the whole puzzle yet. You might think what you know doesn't matter. You might think it's too small, too old, or too risky. But sometimes one tiny detail is the crack that breaks everything wide open. You can help by calling Crime Stoppers 1-800-222-TIPS. That's 1-800-222-TIPS. You can stay anonymous. Nobody will know it was you. You can email me directly at deathliesalibis@gmail.com. Share this episode, please. Put her name where they can't erase it. Talk about her with your friends, online, in your community. You can start the conversation, ask the questions. And if you know anything about where Sydney was in her last weeks, who she was with, any of the houses or garage or hotels, any any people who might have profited from her silence, please come forward. Like I said, the smallest detail does matter. And this isn't just an episode. This is something big, start of something bigger, a full documentary, a full investigation, a full reckoning. We'll publish what others won't, connect the dots, and we're going to follow every lead no matter where it goes. I'd like to do a live stream maybe once a week so we can all get together and chat. Let's shine a light into every corner that followed her story. The more voices that speak up, the harder it becomes for anyone to bury this case again. Sydney is not just another cold case, and with your help, she'll never be buried again. Okay, as we wind up, I want to remind you that everyone named here is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Death, Lies, and Alibis is for informational and educational purposes only. I'm not a professional. I gather very public information, and I present it to you for you to do your own research and form your own opinions. So that's it for this episode of Death, Lies, and Alibis. The story stops here for now, but the questions don't. Cold cases don't fall on their own. It takes attention and pressure and the willingness to care when others don't. Hit the follow button on the podcast so you'll never miss the next episode. Join our Facebook group for documents, case files, and ways to get involved. Or email me at deathliesalibis@gmail.com. As always, be safe, stay alert, and never stop seeking justice.